The council chamber of the Galactic Empire's capital world was vast, its ceilings high enough to house entire warships, its walls embedded with shifting holograms displaying the conquests of the Empire. It was a monument to power, intimidation, and control. Yet, standing at its center, Commander Xylan felt none of those things, only the cold certainty that no one here would listen. His deep blue skin, marked with the scars of 100 battles, was illuminated by the pale glow of the Empire's insignia overhead. The long, ceremonial cloak draped over his broad shoulders made him look every bit the decorated war hero he was. But today, he was not here to bask in his past victories. He was here to warn them. The conquest of Earth must not proceed as planned, Xylan declared, his voice strong, unwavering. Specifically, you must not target Earth's women. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some were amused, others irritated. Emperor Xalrath, seated atop a throne of obsidian and pulsing energy conduits, leaned forward. His black eyes glowed faintly beneath his silver crown-like helm. He studied Xylan with the casual interest of a predator observing a weaker creature's final struggle. "This is what you bring before us." Xalrath's voice was sharp, edged with contempt. "You, a commander who has raised worlds in my name, who has crushed rebellions and bent empires to my will. You stand before me and plead for the enemy? They are not the enemy. Not yet." Xylan took a step closer, ignoring the guards shifting at the Emperor's side. "Earth's history is one of resilience. They are a primitive species, yes, but they endure. And when attacked, they adapt. There is something different about them, something no conquest data can fully explain. You have read the reports, my Emperor. You have seen the wars they've waged against themselves, their ability to rise after every fall. You will not find easy submission here." A scoff came from the left. Grand Strategist Valus, a gaunt, calculating figure with cybernetic implants along his skull, tilted his head. "And yet, we have crushed greater civilizations with a fraction of our fleet. Earth's defenses are laughable." Xylan ignored him. His piercing gaze remained fixed on Xalrath. "It is not just their resilience I speak of. There are legends among my people, warnings passed down from the days before we had even left our own system. Legends that speak of Earth's women." The murmurs stopped. Even those who had been whispering among themselves turned their full attention to him now. Xalrath's lips curled in a slow smirk. "Legends? My court does not entertain fairy tales, Commander. They are more than myths," Xylan pressed on. "Every species that has sought to extinguish the women of Earth has met ruin. It is in the archives, buried in ancient texts predating even our most advanced records. The moment you strike them, something awakens. The balance of their world shifts. Empires crumble, not by their hands alone, but by forces that defy logic." Valus rolled his mechanical eye. "And what forces would those be?" "I do not know," Xylan admitted. "No one does. But history is clear. Those who have tried have perished." The Emperor's smirk widened. He turned to his gathered council, spreading his hands. "And this, my esteemed advisors, is the voice of fear." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Xylan clenched his jaw. He had fought beside these men. He had led invasions, razed planets to dust, and watched countless civilizations beg for mercy that never came. But Earth was not like the others. He felt it in his very bones. Xalrath rose from his throne, descending the steps toward him. He stopped a mere breath away, his presence suffocating, the heat of his bio-enhanced body radiating waves of barely restrained power. "You have grown weak, Xylan." The Emperor's voice was softer now, almost pitying. "You have spent too long in the outer worlds, where sentimentality infects the mind. You forget your place." "I remember my place," Xylan replied. "My place is to protect the Empire from making mistakes it cannot undo." Xalrath exhaled sharply, his patience spent. "Enough of this." He turned, lifting a single hand toward the assembly. "The invasion proceeds at full scale. The women of Earth, should they resist, will be eradicated alongside the rest." Xylan's blood ran cold. "You cannot do this," he said, his voice lower now, more desperate. Xalrath did not even glance back. You are relieved of your command, effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Guards flanked Xylan within seconds. He did not resist as they placed their hands upon his arms, did not fight as they began dragging him toward the chamber's exit. Resistance would do nothing here. But before he was forced through the grand doors, he turned back one last time, his voice ringing through the hall with a final warning. You do not understand what you are about to awaken. Zalrath did not turn. Then the doors slammed shut, and the Empire sealed its fate. The first assault came at dawn. Earth's skies split apart as the Galactic Empire's warships descended, their hulking metallic forms blotting out the sun. Cities erupted in chaos as the invasion began with precise, ruthless efficiency. Ion cannons turned skyscrapers into molten ruins, while energy barriers enclosed entire districts, trapping millions inside. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and ozone, the ground trembling beneath the weight of the Empire's relentless advance. General Aleia Carter stood at the center of a makeshift command post beneath what remained of Washington, D.C.'s defense headquarters. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with dust and blood, but her mind remained sharp. The holographic display before her flickered with reports from resistance cells worldwide. London was burning. Tokyo was under siege. Cairo had been cut off entirely. Every line of communication crackled with the same message. Earth was losing. Her fingers tightened into a fist as another wave of enemy dropships descended beyond the horizon. She had spent years preparing for war, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The Empire did not conquer, they eradicated. A voice crackled through her earpiece. General Carter, you need to see this. She turned sharply, making her way through the rubble-strewn corridors of the bunker to where her second-in-command, Captain Elias Monroe, stood by an intelligence officer monitoring intercepted enemy transmissions. His usually composed expression was grim. The Empire has issued a global directive, Monroe said, nodding to the officer. Play it. The transmission, decoded from the Empire's encrypted network, began with the sharp, unfeeling voice of Grand Strategist Velis. The Supreme Command has identified Earth's women as key obstacles to pacification efforts. Resistance leadership, scientific authorities, and tactical coordinators. Terminate all targets immediately. Silence fell over the room. Carter's pulse pounded in her ears. This isn't just an invasion, Monroe said darkly. It's targeted extermination. Carter exhaled slowly, her mind racing. The Empire's arrogance had finally shown its hand, and in their ignorance, they had made the one mistake Xylan had warned them against. She didn't know why, but she knew deep in her bones, that this was the turning point. She straightened, eyes flashing with renewed determination. Then we make them regret it. Meanwhile, high above the carnage, aboard the Empire's command dreadnought Obsidian Wrath, Emperor Zalrath observed the battlefield with calculated indifference. The surface of Earth shimmered through the reinforced viewport, a planet on the brink of submission. The resistance was persistent, yes, but ultimately futile. Velis approached, his mechanical enhancements whirring softly. The directive is in effect. All major cities will be cleared of resistance leaders within the next cycle. Zalrath did not look away from the planet below. And yet, the battle drags on. Velis hesitated. There have been anomalies. The Emperor's gaze finally shifted. Explain. The strategist gestured toward a series of data streams projected into the air. Since the directive was issued, our forces have encountered unexpected disruptions. Atmospheric disturbances. Electrical surges. Some of our ground units report experiencing equipment failures in areas where female resistance leaders are concentrated. Zalratha's expression remained unreadable. Mere coincidence. Velis hesitated again. Perhaps. But Commander Xylan's warning. Enough. The single word was spoken softly, yet it carried a weight that crushed further argument. Velis bowed his head slightly. As you command, my Emperor. But even as he withdrew, the data continued to stream before them, undeniable in its implications. Back on Earth, something was stirring. In the heart of a ruined city, beneath the remnants of a collapsed research facility, Dr. Naomi Valdez awakened to a strange sensation. The air around her hummed, alive with an energy she could neither see nor explain. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself upright, shards of glass crunching beneath her palms. She had been working on an experimental energy grid before the invasion began, one designed to harness the latent electromagnetic fields of the planet. But now, as she reached for the shattered remains of her console, the device flickered to life beneath her fingertips. She gasped. It shouldn't be possible. There was no power left in this sector. The Empire's attacks had wiped out the grid hours ago. Yet the device responded to her touch, pulsing with an unfamiliar glow. She rose slowly, stepping into the moonlight, filtering through the wreckage above. The city lay in ruin, but in the distance she could see something unusual. Lights flickering in unnatural patterns, as if responding to an unseen force. She wasn't the only one feeling it. Across the world, women in key positions, scientists, warriors, leaders, were experiencing similar phenomena. Machines activating without power. Communication signals piercing through enemy jamming fields. Weapon systems rebooting against all odds. It was as if the planet itself was responding. In an underground resistance hideout, General Carter listened as reports flooded in. Something was changing. She turned to Monroe. "We need to reach Xylan." Monroe frowned. He was exiled. There's no guarantee he's even alive. Carter's jaw tightened. Then we better pray he is. Because if what's happening is what I think it is, he may be the only one who knows how to stop it. High above, aboard a stolen Imperial transport drifting through the outer atmosphere, Xylan watched the battle unfold. His exile had not broken him. It had only given him time to prepare. He had warned the Empire, but they had not listened. Now, it was too late for them. The prophecy was unfolding, and Earth was awakening. The storm erupted without warning. Across the battlefield, winds howled through the ruined cities, carrying with them a charge that sent shivers down the spines of those who fought beneath the darkened sky. Lightning forked violently, striking with unnatural precision, disabling enemy war machines, and igniting the very air with crackling bursts of white-hot energy. Soldiers on both sides hesitated, staring at the heavens in confusion and fear. In the heart of Washington's last stronghold, General Aleia Carter stood before the flickering war map, her breath steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Reports came in from across the world. Power surges neutralizing enemy strongholds, orbital bombardments disrupted by cascading system failures, fleets falling into disarray. The Empire's once unshakable war machine was stalling, its advance faltering like a beast struggling against invisible chains. "This isn't just a fluke," Monroe muttered beside her, his hands braced against the table. "Something is interfering with their systems." Carter exhaled, a slow, measured breath. "No," she said, glancing toward the entrance of the bunker, where a lone figure stood, cloaked in the shadows. "Someone." Xylan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The weight of exile had not dulled the fire in his eyes, nor had it stripped him of his purpose. He had traveled through the war-torn ruins of Earth, watching the pieces fall into place, feeling the pulse of something far greater than mere resistance. "They have awakened," he said, his voice quiet yet firm. Carter studied him, waiting for more. He gave it to her. "The legend spoke of balance," Xylan continued, "of an unseen force tied to Earth's women, something woven into the fabric of this world. The moment the Empire turned its hand against them, the planet itself retaliated. Not with soldiers, not with weapons, but with a force we do not understand." Monroe scoffed. "You're saying Earth is fighting back? That the planet itself is, what? Alive?" Xylan shook his head. "Not alive, but aware. It has always been aware, and now it is responding." Outside, another surge of energy rippled through the battlefield. Enemy dropships plummeted from the sky as their engines failed mid-air. Imperial dreadnoughts, once imposing and invincible, were losing control, their targeting systems scrambled beyond recovery. The Empire's forces were no longer fighting a war, they were being unmade, piece by piece, by something they had never accounted for. In the Imperial War Chamber aboard the Obsidian Wrath, Emperor Zalrath stood motionless before the failing command console. His golden eyes flickered with something that had never crossed his mind before today: doubt. The reports came in like a flood, each one more impossible than the last. Energy fields collapsing, weapons locking up, soldiers reporting hallucinations, visions of spectral figures moving through the battlefield, women who should have been dead, standing in defiance, their presence turning the tide in ways no strategy could counter. Valus approached cautiously, his expression devoid of its usual smug certainty. "Your Majesty, we are losing." Zalrath turned, his gaze slow and deliberate. "Impossible." "We have miscalculated," Valus admitted, his voice a whisper. "We assumed Earth's strength lay in its weapons, its armies. But it is something else entirely, something beyond our control." The Emperor's jaw tightened. He had dismissed Xylan's warnings as the ramblings of a man grown weak with sentiment. He had seen Earth as just another conquest, another world to bend beneath the weight of his dominion. He had been wrong. Aboard a collapsing Imperial outpost in the ruins of Paris, Dr. Naomi Valdez stood amidst the flickering remains of a research station, her fingers moving frantically over the last functioning console. She didn't know how, but the energy surging through her veins was guiding her, connecting her to something beyond human understanding. The equations she had spent years refining were no longer theories. They were alive, shifting before her eyes, rewriting the very laws of energy and physics. The world hummed beneath her feet, waiting for her to act. With a final keystroke, she sent the pulse through the network. Across the world, the last remnants of the Empire's hold shattered. Their ships, their machines, their weapons, everything that relied on power, on control, failed. Not in fire or destruction, but in silence. The war ended in a whisper, and Earth stood victorious. The silence that followed was unnatural. For the first time since the invasion began, the skies above Earth were still. The Empire's warships no longer loomed like predators waiting to strike. Their once impenetrable strongholds lay in ruins, abandoned by soldiers who had either fled or fallen. The vast armies that had stormed Earth with ruthless precision were now little more than scattered remnants, leaderless and broken. General Aleia Carter stepped through the shattered remains of what had once been a battlefield, her boots crunching softly against debris-strewn pavement. Smoke still curled from the wreckage of Imperial war machines, their lifeless husks marking the places where the tide had turned. She inhaled deeply, tasting the metallic bite of ozone in the air, the last remnants of the strange, unseen force that had surged through the planet in its final act of defiance. Monroe stood beside her, his rifle lowered but still gripped tightly, as if half expecting the battle to resume at any moment. "It doesn't feel real," he muttered. "It is," Carter said. She wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. Nearby, Xylan watched the horizon, his expression unreadable. His exile had come full circle. He had warned the Empire, had spoken of forces they could not control, and in their arrogance, they had refused to listen. Now they were gone, not by the might of armies, but by something far older, something they had never even considered a threat. "Their fleet is retreating," he said finally, eyes fixed on the distant stars, where faint flashes of light marked the remnants of the Empire's forces vanishing into the void. "Zalrath will not return. Not after this." Monroe exhaled sharply. "That's it then? We won." Carter didn't answer right away. Victory was a word she had never dared to believe in. Not after the years of war, the losses, the sacrifices. And yet, here they stood, breathing air that was finally free of the Empire's shadow. Dr. Naomi Valdez emerged from the remains of the old research facility, her hands still trembling from what she had done. The energy had flowed through her like a living current, a force she had never been meant to wield, yet somehow had. Even now she could feel it, faint fading, but there. She met Carter's gaze. The pulse worked. Their systems collapsed completely. "You knew this would happen?" Monroe asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," she admitted. "But the planet did." Xylan turned to her, something almost reverent in his gaze. It responded to you. To all of you. Naomi shook her head. It wasn't me. It was us. The realization settled over them like a slow dawn. The Empire had sought to crush Earth's spirit, to eliminate those they saw as its greatest strength. But in doing so, they had awakened something beyond their comprehension, a force that had been waiting, watching, until the moment it was needed. Carter's radio crackled to life, a voice breaking through the static. General, this is Resistance Command. Confirming global enemy, retreat. We have won. The words hung in the air, fragile, delicate, as if speaking them aloud might shatter the reality they had fought so hard to achieve. Monroe let out a breathless laugh. Naomi closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. Xylan simply nodded, as if he had always known this would be the outcome. Carter lifted her gaze to the sky, where the last remnants of the Empire's fleet disappeared into the void. They had survived, but something told her this was only the beginning.